So excuse my English. Thank you, gentlemen, for accepting La Tribune's invitation. For those who are not yet familiar with the Commandant de l'Espace, maybe in a few words, what is the purpose of the, can we call it Space Command? Because in English it makes it more, you're the boss of the Space Command.
I completely agree. Well, English is a language for space anyway. And again, I have to thank Daniele for being here this morning. And I think ears must be ringing with all that French. So I'm not really sure he can understand everything, but thank you very much for being here, Daniele. Yes, I agree that Space Command sounds very great. I also love my official title of Space Commander. That's something.
Even your wife calls you Space Commander.
Of course, of course. When I'm boss at home, which is not every day, right? And back to your question, yeah, the Space Command is a recent creation. It really comes from the realization that space is more and more congested and disputed in some ways. And we noticed, in fact, the emergence of some security and safety problems in space. And somebody had to take care of that. Of course, it's a general endeavor. It's something we share with all the space operators. But space commands around the world, and they are created everywhere. We were born the same year, the Space Force and the Space Command were born in the US, by the way. So, and we are a bit younger than they are, but we were born the same year. And you can witness the creation of space commands all around the world. Japan was mentioned earlier, but of course Italy, but also Spain, the UK, Germany, and others. And all that is also the fact that in those difficult areas and areas of operations, when you've got a security problem, the best way is to give it to the military because they've got ways of doing things. But of course, we have also to envisage.
I like the understatement. We've got ways to doing things.
Of course. Well, but it's exactly what we are talking about. If you are looking at risks, it's not necessarily, but if you are looking at threats, you need to envisage the use of force, and that's a military job in the end. But it's very similar to what is done in the high seas or in airspace or in other areas. And I think that's exactly the reasoning behind the creation of Space Command as well in Italy, I suppose.
So you can do the interview instead of me. So how did the Italian plan to set up a space policy office come about?
Well, first of all, bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, and I apologize, that's the only French I can speak. So I apologize even for my English, because my English may not be that good. But I thank you very much for the invitation. I thank you, La Tribune, and of course I thank General that I just met, because we do have a natural friendship toward the space matter. In Italy, space was a long ago endeavor, starting from the 60s with the San Marco program, with our founding father of a space program in Italy. Then we had some other programs going around the early 2000s. And with the reorganization, with the technological advantages that we came up in the last year, we decided to take the governance of space in hand. And of course, the military was one of the sides. The other side is the economical one with the space economy. So in Italy, the governance decided to build up a space policy office within the General Defense Staff, which I am honored to be the chief of.
And how do you say space commander in Italian?
Comando Operazioni Spaziali. That's very fashion.
That's also very good.
It's very fashion. Also because space, as NATO said in 2019, is a new domain. So we had to shift our point of view from thinking what to do through space in what to do in space. And that's what we are dealing right now. What to do in space, what are the advantages to exploit, and what are the threats and the dangerous endeavors. General Adam just said we need to find out a common ground in order to have a structural law in space. After the law comes enforcing the law. And enforcing the law, we need to be prepared. Thank you.
Our space used to be seen as a peaceful area, but now We are talking about militarization of space with the fear of escalation. How is the Space Command responding in France and in Italy?
It's exactly what we said. We have to prepare for war, but the thing we want to avoid is war, of course. It's not because we are preparing that we want to fight it, of course. So it's the general phrase, if you want peace, you have to prepare for war. And that's exactly what we do. So for that, we have to be ready to respond to some situation, even with the use of force if it's necessary. It starts also with understanding what's happening, identifying behaviors, and be ready according to the existing law, of course, to use whatever power and justification and legitimation we can do to counter some problematic aggression or behavior in space. So that's really what we are doing, and for that, of course, we have to be ready, and you have to militarize space if you like, but certainly put some dedicated military assets in space and be ready to use it in a military way, which is something new. The use of space for the military is not new, of course. We have been using space for a long time, and the creation of the Space Command in France, for example, was also, there is a challenge of bringing together all the units that were dealing with space before and developing new missions, and those new missions are mainly what we call now active defense in space, which is exactly that, making sure that we can maintain peace in space, but exactly the same way that the Navy is doing it on the high seas or the Air Force is doing it in the airspace.
Is it the same in Italy? What is the current state of the space defense in your country?
Well, I'd just like to highlight something that General Adam said. It's very important to be prepared in order to avoid threats or compete with threats in space. Right now, we are all on the same page with our technological, industrial development, but one day we may not be all like-minded with the space exploration and exploitation. So we need to be prepared, and to be prepared is something you don't improvise. You don't wake up in the morning and you find out that you have the capability to understand what's going on in space and do something about it. So it is important preparation, operational preparation, and right now we are in Italy starting with a built-in self-defense perspective from our satellites and space infrastructure. One day we may share also with France, for sure, some other ways of defending ourselves in space with some active or reactive technologies which are developing right today.
In 2018, there was an incident involving the spying on the Franco-Italian satellite called Athena Fidus. Perhaps it's worth recalling in a few words what happened. It was the Russian.
It was something about the Russian, I recall. I was doing another job at the time, but this was something about the Russian trying to intercept our comms, if I'm not wrong. And was one of the very first, red alert we had from space.
And so what did we learn for this kind of incident, Général Adam?
Well, it was where the realization that something was happening in space that was regarding everybody's security, and that led to the writing of a space strategy for defense in France and in other countries as well. Also, the decision to create the Space Command in France. But also, as you mentioned, it was an international incident in space, after all. What the minister of that time, Madame Parly, called a very unfriendly behavior. But as you mentioned, it was around a shared satellite that was in fact operated together by France and Italy. So that also shows that in space everything is shared, and when you have a problem, usually you have to share also the problem with your partners, and the solution will come with cooperation. And it developed with time, of course, and you see Madame Delga just talked about this bubbling atmosphere in space because there are so many things appearing everywhere, and I'm pretty happy to see some companies in the audience and especially what Astroscale is doing is pretty interesting, and it's a matter of cooperation. Multinational, so we involve Japan, we involve, of course, Italy, and all the countries in Europe. And with Italy, we will discuss that matter bilaterally, but also in many forums, internationals, NATO, of course, the EU, are other forums where we can discuss security in space.
So, if I may add something, we come from a common ground of cooperation for air defense between Italy and France. We join the same view of a single European sky. Now we have to join the same view of a single European space, because there are no boundaries up there, and being prepared against a violent or act is something that we need to deal with, because we have to remember there is no democracy without security. So we need to enforce security in order to be able to give a free use and access to space to our economies throughout Europe and the whole world, the international organization. So cooperation is the only way.
So cooperation is the key, everything is going fast. How we are forging this international partnership to be more effective?
It's really through discussions and those forums. Of course, every nation has its own responsibilities in space. They have to develop their own law, their own systems, but also make up their own responsibility and make sure they can stand up to their responsibilities. And the partnership are through discussions now. It's discussions on the military side, of course, between military, but also on the policy sides, on the industrial sides as well. So, in fact, there are many aspects of this security that we have to discuss together. Only on the military aspects, of course, we have many occasions to talk together with our partners in an area of operation which is not only huge, it's the biggest area of operation of all, of course, and still expanding. But also without no borders, and where you encounter every day all your partners, whether they are commercial or international, but also your competitors, which makes things interesting as well. But yeah, many opportunities. Of course, our responsibility as military is to make sure that we have compatible approaches and some interoperability in space as well.
Well, starting from our belonging to the same international organization, like NATO, like the EU, so we need to speak in a very broad table, so with many different nations, and somehow when the parterre is too wide, it's difficult to find a quick common pattern. So bilateral agreements are the way to speed up things. Also because the technological development is so fast, we need to cope with that. And on the military point of view, we are one of the three streams that are driving the space matters: political, economical, and military. So we are one of those streams, and we need to talk to each other on a bilateral level, because the military, they always share the same objective, which is security. On the industrial side, sometimes their interests, they drift apart. Just to be polite about that. But on the military side, we share the same ends and the same objectives, so it's much easier to find out a common pattern. On the bilateral side, we can speed things up.
Yes, but don't let out the political side.
I'm not going to talk about politics.
Yeah, but you have to be aligned with the politics of the country.
We follow the political addresses. In Italy, the space governance is always under the military, the political perspective. So we are following the political points of view. We are following the political addresses. But of course, we talk among militaries for the ways of doing things.
So let's talk now about resources. You have at the very beginning it was a small office somewhere in Toulouse, and now you have a huge. No, I'm joking, but now you have what kind of resources? Supercomputers, very qualified people. You can talk about that.
In fact, it was not only a small office. We had a couple of units, but yes, when the Space Command was created in France, there were in the military, in the armed forces, there were around 200 people working for space, and now the aim is to get to the 500 mark by the end of this decade. So right now we are around 300, most of them here in Toulouse. The idea is also to develop, of course, our capabilities. So it comes with equipment in space, but also on the ground. We have to develop our capabilities. The ground segment in space is very often overlooked, but it's very important for security, safety of operations. What is visible is in space. What is critical is probably most often on the ground. And as you mentioned, all that is very digital. There's many data, lots of objects to track, more and more objects to track. By the way, they are now counting by the thousands. And this has to be followed, 24/7. Of course, they are moving fast. They are pretty difficult to track. They are far away in a very in an area where it's pretty difficult to track them. So that makes for lots of computation.
You know, there are startups who are specialized in this kind of tracking.
I know. Yeah, we are working with all of them. Not really, providing enough money. I know they will come to me after that, of course.
There is a networking room here if you want to talk.
But we encourage that, and then on our side is the challenge is to benefit from all the data that we can collect everywhere. We can buy or get from partners and the commercial partners or international partners. But the difficulty is, as you mentioned, supercalculators are something. We need to make sure that we can process this vast amount of data. But also we have also to make sure that we can help our operators to make quick decisions and to build scenarios for reactions in the future. So that's also lots of digital tools that we have to put in place that don't exist right now. And it's a need in all the countries and in all the space commands right now.
You have the same problems in Italy? Resources always?
Resources are always not enough, but we are doing our best in order to maintain our full supply chain. We have a quite good supply chain. We can, between the industry and the government, we are able to build up the satellite and put it in orbit all the way through. So we are trying to maintain this level of ambition and increasing it, of course. And we're also making an effort in order to participate to all the international staff, all the international organization and commandant. We do have a liaison officer in the Commandant de l'Espace. We do have a chief of staff here in Toulouse, in the NATO Center of Excellence. We have many other officers around the world being liaison for the space matters for Italy. So we are doing our best in order not only to improve our capabilities, but to cooperate with other nations to share interoperability and space endeavors.
What specific strengths do you have in the Italian industry? You talk about the supply chain.
Well, we do have some pretty good industry. The very first one that comes into my mind is, of course, the Leonardo Alenia with sharing with Thales a very good cooperation and industrial commonalities. We do have many other national industries that are capable to give us the technological needs and means that we need to preserve our space operational capabilities. For sure, nobody is able to cope by itself, not on the government or on the industrial side. So cooperation with the military, with government, and with industries are the only way to explore and exploit the space.
Général, Adam, you have a strange acronym. What is YODA? Why ODA?
Well, it's an obvious reference to the pop culture, of course. I will not explain that. The name itself is an acronym, as you said, for U en orbite pour un démonstrateur agile. So it's really an experimental equipment, a small satellite that is supposed to patrol the geo arc. So it's 36,000 kilometers away from Earth. And the challenge is to bring that satellite up in the air and learn how to operate it as a patroller to maintain security on this part of of space.
So there is a bit of fun in the army. Call it.
Of course, when I joined, I wanted to have fun, and I have fun every day.
It's an acronym a bit stretched. Yeux en orbite. Okay, whatever.
Pour un démonstrateur agile.
C'est pas mal. What makes a military launch unique compared to civilian one?
It's unique because we are certainly more cautious about security problems on the operation security. We certainly want to make sure that we will maintain through its lifespan the capability to operate it. We don't want it to be stolen from us, of course. We don't want it to be hijacked by anybody. We don't want its capabilities to be cancelled by anybody. So that needs some precaution. And the main thing about the difference between a civilian launch and a military launch is that we will have people making sure that nobody can touch the satellite itself. And we want to make sure that when the satellite is up, it has not been compromised during the launch process.
So the main vulnerabilities at the ground level, mainly?
Yes. If somebody wants to sabotage it, of course, it will be done on the ground. After up in space, we face some threats in space, but they're not the same kind, of course. But if somebody has, wants to introduce something in its systems, it will be done on the ground. It's easier done on the ground. After, we have ways to protecting it. You can't upload very easily something when it's in space, so we have to protect the systems when it's still on the ground.
And I guess you don't say that lightly. If you say that, it means there have been threats.
Threats are everywhere, and that's really it's been confirmed over the past years. Of course, after the creation of the Space Command, that was created because we were operating those threats, and those threats are today everywhere, of course. And we know that we are challenged in space. Everybody's challenged. We are as military, but all the operators are challenged in space as well, by competitions, but also by states sometimes. And we have to be ready to face that. But if you list all the possible threats in space, they all exist right now. They are there.
It's quite reassuring.
The worst threat is the one you're not expecting. So we need to be prepared also for the unseen and unforeseen. And we don't need to set a stage for competition between military and civilian space project. It's a cooperation, but for sure on the military side, we need to make sure that security is one of the items accomplished and complete that we bring into space.
And what is the future of Italy's space defense? What are Italy's space defense projects?
Well,
what you can tell us without...
Of course. For sure, strengthening cooperation on bilateral, multilateral floors are one of our first aims. On the more operational side, everybody is eager of more bandwidth, satellite communication. So we need to improve that side. We're already sharing 2 payloads between Italy and France. So satellite communication, space operation, meaning the capability of doing a responsive launch if needs be. And for sure our space-based situational awareness in order to understand what's happening in space, both for civilian and military purpose, because we need to understand this new domain, and for understanding you have to have the data and process them.
And almost the same question for you, Général Adam. What are we going to see in the coming weeks or months?
In the short term, of course, what we are all waiting for is the launch of CSO3 in Kourou by the end of this year on Ariane 6. My main milestone is in a couple of months, by the end of 25, we want to have an initial capability declared in Toulouse for the Space Command. We are right now building our main facility here, together with the main facility for the NATO Center of Excellence, by the way, here in Toulouse, and we want to be in a position to operate from there at the end of next year, which is a big challenge. So we need that building ready, but also all the systems, all the people trained, and some procedures in place, plus all the cooperation and partnerships that we can get.
And one very last question, in a few words: what are the most likely threats that we could expect?
I'd say
I
cyber
see
threats.
A lot of secrets in your brain, in your eyes.
I'm filtering. I'm saying cyber threats because cyber is something that connects everybody. So cyber threats are more, closer than real physical threats to satellites, I guess. Because for now, the capabilities of cyber are much more advanced than the physical capabilities to damage a satellite.
So it's just a matter of when.
Always.
I can tell you the when is now. If you are talking about threats, we observe every day jamming of space capabilities right now. So be careful with your GPS for all of you, right? It's not completely reliable, it's easily jammed, and jamming is everywhere right now, but of course on the theater of operations, but it can happen anywhere.
Thank you for these words of hope. Thank you, gentlemen, for the quality of your contribution. Please give them a round of applause.